Hearing, United States District Court, or within the District of Vermont, is now open and ready for the transaction of business. The Honorable Colleen Brown presiding. Please remain standing.
Good afternoon. Please be seated. I want to begin by welcoming you to this naturalization ceremony and telling you that normally these ceremonies are held in one of Vermont's beautiful district courtrooms, but we frequently have them out in the community. And when they're in the community, I think they're especially valuable because we're welcoming these new citizens not just to this country or to Vermont, but actually to the communities of Vermont. So this is especially nice, and of course it's a special privilege to be here at the Calvin Coolidge Presidential. And I want to introduce Amity Schlaze, who will make a few remarks.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Amity Schlaze from the Coolidge Foundation. This is President Coolidge's birthplace. He first saw the light of day here. He looked at those hills. And we thought when we were planning this that it's also a kind of birthplace for you, the birth of your new life as American citizens. This morning is especially therefore fitting that this site is host to you, you Americans. Several groups have come together to welcome you today. The first is the state of Vermont, which cares for this historic site. Mr. Bill Jenny, who is in charge of standing there in the back by the window. The second is our foundation, which advances the ideas and knowledge of one of our presidents, Calvin Coolidge, the 30th President of the United States. The third, of course, is the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. So we'd especially like to thank Jean Carr and Donna Chadwick of USCIS for helping to bring together this ceremony. And the fourth party here is Judge Colleen Brown, who you just heard. We are honored to have Judge Brown join us to preside over this ceremony and administer your oath of allegiance. We are joined by a couple of other guests that we'd like to mention. Jeffrey Pippinger, who is staff representative for Senator Bernie Sanders' office. Shannon Bernari, staff representative for Congressman Peter Welch. And Vermont Representative Allison Clarkson, who represents the towns of Plymouth, Reading, and Woodstock in Montpelier. Special guests are you. We are pleased to welcome you, your family, and your friends. Today, your group includes 20 immigrants who come from 16 different countries. Before we start, I'd just like to say one or two things about Coolidge. Probably you know his family were migrants. They came here, a tough place from the Boston area, but those Boston Coolidges before were immigrants. Cottenham, England was where they came from, and Coolidge understood that all Americans have an immigrant background. He said, whether one traces his Americanism back 3 centuries to the Mayflower or 3 years of steerage in a boat, we are all now in the same boat together. We at the Coolidge Foundation feel immigration is key to America and even have a scholar of immigration on our staff, Executive Director Matthew Denhart. You'll hear from Matt in a while. But first, please join me in welcoming a very special guest. Please rise as Jennifer Sales Harville, great-granddaughter of President and Grace Coolidge, sings the national anthem. Jennifer.
What's so proudly
Sussman, who's representative from Senator Patrick Leahy's office. And also David DeMag, United States Marshal. So now we are ready for the presentation of petitioners for citizens.
Thank you, Your Honor. It is my privilege to present to the court 19 applicants for naturalization from 16 countries. Each applicant has been examined by an officer of the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, and each applicant has been found to be eligible for naturalization. USCIS now comes before the court to move that all candidates be naturalized. Your Honor, there are also 3 applicants that have requested that a change of name be granted by the court. The service interposes no objections to these requests. Thank you.
The request for name changes is granted, and I invite Matthew Danhart, who's the Executive Director of the Calvin Coolidge Presidential Foundation, to come forward for a few remarks.
Thank you, Judge Brown. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you especially, though, to our immigrants, our 19 immigrants who are here today representing 16 countries. It is a real thrill and a pleasure and honor for us to have you here today. Many of you have lived in America for many, many years. I've spoken with some of you this morning. Some of you have come more recently. But regardless of when you came or what country you came from, we're delighted that you made the commitment to become a citizen of the United States. We especially like to welcome you here to Plymouth Notch, of course, the birthplace and the resting place of President Coolidge. President Coolidge himself understood well the value of immigration to America, but he's often misunderstood on this topic of immigration. Indeed, he's often thought to have been somewhat opposed to immigration, or at least to expanding immigration beyond the levels that persisted when he was president in the 1920s. Coolidge, indeed, you'll find instances of when he said things that would have suggested that he favored some restrictions on immigration. There's no denying that as president he signed the Reed-Johnson Act of 1924, which placed limits, really for more or less the first time, on immigration to the U.S. Yet more careful study reveals that such a conclusion that Coolidge opposed immigration, is far too simple, as things tend to be. Yes, he favored some restrictions on immigration, but he was very clear that he understood the importance of immigrants, and I'm going to explain and elaborate a little bit on that in a few remarks here this afternoon. Coolidge knew that strong citizenship, all of you who are becoming citizens today, he knew that strong citizenship meant combining the best traditions of other peoples from other places, other cultures, other traditions, with America's own institutions. To Coolidge, becoming a U.S. citizen did not mean abandoning one's past culture or traditions or way of life. In fact, one of Coolidge's portrait painters, a man named Ercole Cortado, shared an anecdote that proves this was true. In an essay, Cortado recounts a time when Coolidge arrived to a room where Cortado was waiting to work on a portrait of Coolidge. And joining Coolidge was an American diplomat who had just returned home from Europe. And President Coolidge, of course, graciously introduced Mr. Cortado to the diplomat, and recognizing the Italian-sounding last name, the diplomat asked Cortado, American or Italian? Question. And Cortado, in his essay, reports, this is what he had to say about the incident. He said, President Coolidge answered for me with a single terse word, both. This sentiment is present elsewhere in Coolidge's speech, in his speeches. In a 1926 speech dedicating a statue to the Swedish woman John Eriksson, Coolidge explained, these are Coolidge's words, none of us who came here are required to leave any good qualities behind. But they are rather required to strengthen and fortify them and supplement them with such additional good qualities as they find among us. Coolidge knew that immigrants brought skills and values that made America stronger. Going back to our anecdote about the portrait painter Cortado, he told Cortado, if you were less considerate of the land of your birth, that would have been Italy, you probably would not care so much as you do for this country. And you wouldn't care so much for America. You can serve this land better, meaning America, and more by bringing to it the best that you inherited. So by this, Coolidge was saying that Cortado and other immigrants do America service by bringing their skills and experiences here. Coolidge recognized that America was a country of immigrants and needed immigrants to remain a strong and vital country. Now, Coolidge did believe that it was vitally important that all Americans, whether native or foreign-born, become one people. He said, and this is a quote, in this country, we're all bound together in a common destiny. We must all be united as one people. For Coolidge, the key point was that immigrants, like native-born people, must become strong citizens. He took citizenship very seriously because he knew that U.S. citizenship was and continues to be a tremendous honor. In a speech about the Civil War at Arlington Cemetery in May of 1924, Coolidge rejoiced, saying, "American citizenship is high estate. He who holds it is the peer of kings." The peer of kings. So all of us who are already citizens, Coolidge said, we're the peer of kings, and those of you becoming citizens today, Coolidge would have said, you're joining the peer of kings. Coolidge also conveyed in that same speech, about the Civil War at Arlington Cemetery, that citizenship has been secured only by untold toil and effort. It will be maintained by no other method. It demands the best that men and women have to give. So citizenship not only is a tremendous honor and privilege, but it requires much responsibility of those who are fortunate enough to be called American citizens. Immigrants throughout history have fulfilled their responsibilities of citizenship in many ways. One is by becoming citizens, as all of you are today. Another way is by participating in your communities, as Judge Brown mentioned earlier, by becoming involved in elections and in the democratic process and in civic works. Today we have 20 actually, we're missing one, but we have 19 candidates for naturalization from 16 countries, and all of you will be joining us. We have other immigrants in the room, like Anka Coolidge Abba, who are still on the road to naturalization, and we welcome that and encourage that process. That's why we're hosting this ceremony today. But another way that immigrants demonstrate good citizenship is by contributing to the economy. That's an area that I've devoted the past several years to studying and writing about, and I'll share a couple of the ways that immigrants contribute to the economy right now, but these are just a few. Data from the U.S. Census Bureau show that immigrants are more likely, in fact, than native-born citizens to be employed. 61% of immigrants are employed compared to 56% of native-born Americans. This sounds like just a small difference, but if native-born Americans were employed at the same rate as immigrants are, we would see today in our economy an additional almost 9 million workers. Over the past decade, the U.S. economy has added about 8.4 million workers, new workers, and half of those were immigrants. That's really pretty incredible. Immigrants make up about 13% of our total population, but over the last decade, the growth of our labor force, about half of that was from immigrants coming to help grow our economy. An economy can't grow without innovative new ideas. That's something I think economists would all agree on. Economists never seem to agree on anything, but on that point, I'm almost certain that they would. Immigrants generate many of the ideas that drive our economy forward. Research shows that immigrants are twice as likely as native-born Americans to receive a patent. They're also twice as likely to commercialize their patent and take it to the market. Now, that last fact, that they're particularly good at commercializing patents, lends to the next point. Immigrants are very good at starting businesses. They tend to be very entrepreneurial. Some 18% of all U.S. small business owners are an immigrant. Again, that might not sound like many, but that's almost 1 in 5. And you have to keep in mind that only 13% of the total population are immigrants. So 13% are immigrants, but 18% of all small business owners in the U.S. are immigrants. Now, I don't want people to think that immigrants are only small business owners, though. They start major companies too. In fact, each year, Fortune magazine comes out with its Fortune 500 list. Many of you have probably heard of this list. It's the 500 companies with the most revenue in America in any given year. And among those 500 companies in 2011, research shows that 42% were started by an immigrant or a first-generation American. So those of you who are here today, or perhaps your children. 42%, almost half of those largest companies in America were started by immigrants. You know some of these names. AT&T, Verizon. We're hoping both of them will get a little better cell phone service here. The fact that they have service around the world suggests that those are incredible companies. Other companies like Google, Yahoo, Pfizer, Kraft, DuPont, eBay, and the list goes on and on. All these companies were started by an immigrant or a first-generation American. Here in Vermont, immigrants are helping to lead the way as well. Data show that many immigrants are very highly educated. In fact, a higher proportion of immigrants living in Vermont have a bachelor's degree compared to the native-born population here in Vermont. And among Vermonters with graduate or professional degrees, so the most educated among us, immigrants are even more overrepresented in that group. But today is a joyous occasion. It's a privilege for us to share this day with you. 91 years ago, this very month, Calvin Coolidge stood in the sitting room in his family's homestead just up the road and took the presidential oath of office. It was by the light of a kerosene lamp. His father, Colonel John Coolidge, gave him the oath of office. His father was a notary public, and President Warren Harding had just suddenly died, and the country was out of president, but not for long, because Coolidge became president in this very village. In just a few minutes, you'll recite another oath, the oath of allegiance. And just as Coolidge did, in his oath, you'll swear to defend the Constitution of the United States. So the connections with Coolidge, I think, are very fitting to host you here today, and we hope that you'll enjoy your time here. Coolidge's words from that same 1926 speech when he dedicated the statue to John Harrison, the Swedish-born, are fitting for this occasion, and I'll leave you with these. Coolidge said, "When once our feet have touched this soil, when once we have made this land our home, wherever our place of birth, whatever our race, we are all blended in one common country. All artificial distinctions of lineage and rank are cast aside. We all rejoice in the title of Americans." Thank you for being here today with us, and we look forward to congratulating you as fellow Americans in just a few months. Thank you.
I'd like to take a few minutes to congratulate those of you who are about to become U.S. citizens. This is a very special day for you. Some of you may have traveled great distances, left behind your familial roots, and said difficult goodbyes in order to come to this country. I'm honored to be able to administer the oath of allegiance to you today, and to be one of the first to welcome you as a U.S. citizen. The oath you will take today requires that you absolutely and entirely renounce and endure all